And we're live.
Welcome back to Prophecy 3 DNA, where we discover, decrypt, and demystify Bible prophecy, and then we apply it. My name is Donnie Alvarenga, and this is my brother, Don DeCuna, and we are honored to be facilitating this study of Bible prophecy. We are diving into Revelation now. Over the past couple of weeks, we started kind of talking about the foundation and how we study Revelation. We have talked about how we study the Bible and how the Bible is written and how important it is to understand those tenets and frameworks before we can really truly understand the Bible. And when it comes to understanding Revelation, it is imperative that we understand different parts of the Bible. Revelation is a book of codes, if you will, and the codes are deciphered throughout the Bible. And so as we talk about a subject in Revelation, it's important that we understand that subject wherever it was mentioned in the Bible. And one of those main topics that is really significant and important and imperative that you understand to really truly understand Bible prophecy is the sanctuary. And in Daniel, a couple of months ago, we studied the prophecies associated with Daniel, and we talked about how there were time-based prophecies and there were event-based prophecies. And it's so important that we decipher between the two so that we're not once again, so that we can clearly understand what was originally intended. Okay. And in Daniel, there is the prophecy of the statue, and that statue seems to kind of set the stage for the rest of the prophecies inside of Daniel. And so the different components of that one prophecy get repeated and a little bit more detail later on in the book. And when it comes to Revelation, we're going to be diving in this week into the candlesticks, which is part of the sanctuary. And the candlesticks are somewhat like that foundation for the book of Revelation, which we're going to talk a little bit about the candlesticks, and then it's going to repeat itself and go a little bit deeper. And then it's going to repeat itself and then go a little deeper. And so today we're going to move into the sanctuary and see how it ties in to what's going on right now in heaven and beyond. So anything else you'd like to add to that, Don?
No, I think that's a good intro. Can you pray? Start us out, please.
Yes. Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for all your many blessings. Thank you so much for giving us a preview or helping us understand a little bit of what goes on behind the scenes so that we can, I'm just going to ask, Lord, that you give us understanding for today, that we can understand what you want us to understand. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. All right, so here's our methodology that we use for our study. So here, what helps us understand Revelation? So entering into this part of the presentations have all been about how do we actually understand this book that's full of symbols and it seems all like esoteric and incomprehensible. Okay, the Bible's the key. Christ being our high priest, you can read that pretty much the entire book of Hebrews describes this concept, but in Revelation also it does that. It tells us what God is doing, but he's doing it in a very specific place, and it is the true tabernacle, right? So we brought a passage up last week that showed that when Moses was given the pattern, right, he had to have patterned it off of something, right? And it was what God revealed to him. He's like, this is in this location, this is in this location, this is in this location. In fact, God gives him the dimensions. Make it this long, this tall, all this stuff. So he's giving him very, very detailed accounting of what these things are and where they should be and what should be on them and how to interact with it. Okay. The book of Revelation is actually set up the same way the temple is. And as Jesus is walking through these different parts in the temple in heaven, Revelation kind of deciphers what those things were symbolic of anyway. Okay. The very first thing is the candlestick. And that is in the holy place, right? The 7 branch candlesticks. And it's predominantly chapters 1 through 3 deal with these candlesticks. Now, chapters 1 through 3 talk about each individual candlestick, but we can think of these chapters as like how the statue is for Daniel 2, right? The statue in Daniel 2 gives a whole history of the world, right? From the time of Daniel to the end. The candlesticks do the same thing. The history of the Christian church and the world from the time of Christ to the end, right? So the rest of the chapters in the book of Revelation fall into 1 through 3. Everything else after 1 through 3 is just being slotted in chapters 1 through 3 in one of those candlesticks, right? What we're going to find out is those candlesticks actually represent the church. And when I talk about church, I'm not talking about a denomination. I'm not talking about a specific, the idea would be the church is Christianity. So the religion of Christianity, all right? Those who follow Christ, right? So that's the whole concept of what I say about a church, right? It's not Lutherans or Catholics or Baptists or Mormon. It's if you call yourself a follower of Christ. All right, so we're going to go through this right now. So let's look at the candlesticks and see if Revelation actually does do this. So first we need to understand what the candlesticks were back then, and then seeing what the candlesticks represent in Revelation. So go ahead and read this.
Exodus 25:31-32. You shall make a lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand and its base and its shaft are to be made of hammered metal. Its cups, its buds, and its flowers shall be of one piece. 6 branches shall go out from its sides, 3 branches of the lampstand from its one side, and 3 branches of the lampstand from its other side.
Okay.
Exodus 25:37. You shall make it 7 lamps, and they shall light its lamps so that they may give light to the area in front of it.
So here's a key thing for us already. What is a lampstand supposed to do?
Give light.
So Jesus Christ, at one point, he says, first he says, I am the light of the world. And then later on, he says, you are the light of the world. It is pointless to hide your light. Okay? A deeper meaning would be that if we're given a message from God, it behooves us to share that message with others, right? So this is already a key. If one of the reasons that the symbol of a lampstand is used in the book of Revelation is that the intent of God's people, God's church, is to continually share that message with the world. We can see also at the very end of Matthew, right, where Jesus says, go out into the world, preaching the gospel, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? Some people call it the Great Commission. So it's here. That is the light we're supposed to share. So let's keep reading.
Exodus 26:35. You shall set the table outside the veil and the lampstand opposite the table on the side of the tabernacle toward the south, and you shall put the table on the north side.
Okay. So what is the cardinal direction of the table or of the lampstand?
South.
It's on the south side. The directions that these things are oriented mean things. And as we study, we're going to understand that north means something, west means something, east and south. Okay. So the lampstand is on the southern side of the tabernacle. And read.
Exodus 40:24. And he put the lampstand in the tent of meeting opposite the table on the south side of the tabernacle.
So here's the other thing. So if it's on the south side, the opposite of that would be the north side, and it would be the table of showbread. Now let's look at Revelation and see what does the Father reveal to Jesus to reveal to us. All right, so let's read what Jesus is doing.
Revelation 1:12-18. I turned to see the voice that spoke with me, and when I turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks was one like a son of man, clothed with a garment down to the feet and with a golden sash wrapped around the chest. The hair on his head was white like wool, as white as snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, as if refined in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. He had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword. His appearance was like the sun shining brightly. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though I were dead. Then he laid his right hand on me, saying to me, do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am he who lives, though I was dead. Look, I'm alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of Hades and of death.
Okay, so who is this first and last? Who is he that was alive and dead and alive again?
Jesus.
Jesus. Okay, so this is what Jesus looks like in his glorified form. Okay? Specifically, these seven, he has, he's walking in the midst of these candlesticks, and in his hand, there's 7 stars. Keep reading.
Revelation 1, verse 20, the mystery of the 7 stars which you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks which you saw are the 7 churches.
Okay, so here we already get a great opening salvo that the Bible interprets itself, right? It says right here, 7 stars are the angels. So later on in Revelation, when we see stars, what do we see?
Angels.
Angels. Okay. And in some cases also, ultimately, stars are a representation of God's created beings. Okay. Think of them as not just stars like we think of stars, but think of them as celestial bodies. Right? And now he says, what are the 7 candlesticks representing of?
7 churches.
7 churches. Okay. So as we go through these candlesticks, we're going to see that there's names to these churches, and we'll show you in a diagram here shortly. So go ahead and read this.
John 1, 1 through 4. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were created through him, and without him nothing was created that was created. In him was life, and the life was the light of mankind.
Okay, so Jesus is the actual light that these candlesticks are supposed to give. All right, let's keep reading.
John 1, verse 9, the true light which enlightens everyone was coming into the world. John 3:19, this is the verdict, that light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. John 3:21, but he who does the truth comes to the light, that it may be revealed that his deeds have been done in God.
So there's what John is describing here, actually this is Jesus speaking, is this idea that, like, think about a cockroach. Let's say there's a cockroach that's chilling out, having fun in your kitchen, and then you turn the lights on, right? Do you think that cockroach wants to be exposed to the little cockroachy thing it's doing? No, because immediately a fist would come down, or a shoe or something. That's what he's trying to show. Whereas, if you're at a surprise party, the fun part is when the light comes on. Because now everybody's excited. Now everybody's showing. So that's what Jesus is trying to show, this contrast. If you're trying to hide something, you're probably not going to want to come to the light. And you're going to shy away from the light because it's going to expose your wickedness. Right? Whereas if you have nothing to hide from, you bask in the glow. Right? There's no reason to stay in the shadows. So we can see how Revelation already starts describing that these 7 branch candlesticks are representative of God's church. And what we're going to understand as we go through these is that it's not just God's church, it's God's church in 7 distinct eras or periods of time. Okay? Each period of time is not identical. So for example, candle 1 is in 100 years, and candle 2 is 100 years, and candle 3 is 100 years, and candle 4. That's not how it works. The same way that the statue, right? You think of something like Babylon that was in power for about 90 years. And then you have Persia, who was in charge for a lot longer than that. You have the Greeks that were in charge of even more. And then the Romans were in charge for an exorbitant amount of time. Okay? So just because there's 7 churches doesn't mean that each time period is identical. That's number 1. But we'll just go through it. So let's look at this. This is what it's kind of describing, right? So you have Jesus walking in the midst of these candlesticks, right? And the overarching theme is 7 churches who are God's people across 7 distinct periods of time. And the churches are Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea.
And Thyatira.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed Thyatira. So Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Now, each one of these candlesticks, they're not being burned individually and snuffed out individually. The light from one continues on through the others. I try to do this kind of like in a diagram. So you see this line right here, and then there's a line right here, and then there's a line right here, and a line right here. Why do I say that? Well, because the Christians that are Christians today is because they went through this Ephesus experience. You had to have known Jesus existed to begin with. Does that make sense? Okay. And the influences of Ephesus are still around. The influences of Smyrna are still around. The influences of Pergamum. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So each subsequent church is a decreasing time, right? So you're decreasing time from the beginning of the church to the end time. But what you're doing is the influences of each church have still remained to this day. Okay, that's one thing I want to make clear. The candlesticks never were snuffed out. The point of the candlesticks was to always have light present before God. Okay, some people, when they teach this, they will say, okay, and we got through Ephesus, we're done with them. And Smyrna, we're done. And Pergamum, okay? Just like the statue of Daniel 2, Babylon had an influence on Persia, who had an influence on Greece, who had an influence on Rome. Does that make sense? Who had an influence on the iron mixed with clay. So, when we see these candlesticks, we need to understand that Ephesus will influence Smyrna, will influence Pergamum, and so on and so forth. All right? So, the opening salvo of Revelation is this diagram. Okay? As we continue our study, we're gonna show what else happens in these gaps. Okay? So between Ephesus and Smyrna, these things will get filled up with other things like the seals, like the trumpet. Does that make sense? All right. So one thing that helps me, and this isn't something biblical, I'll be the first one to say it's not biblical, but it helps me when I understand Revelation because I come from a military background, right? And in the military, we have things called principles of domain control. What does that mean? So there's a reason we have a Navy, an Army, an Air Force. The Marine Corps falls into the Navy. So it's so you can have control of those specific domains for your missions. Okay? So for example, in the Air Force, you want to have control of the skies. In the Navy, you want to have control of the seas. And in the land, you want to have control of the land. Right? So the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. To do that, there's actually categories of control. How much control do you have of those domains? And again, this isn't biblical, but it helps my brain. I'm hoping it will help yours because this is actually pretty prevalent in the study of Revelation. All right. So let's look here. There's friendly forces. And on this side, later on, you're going to see that there's the adversarial forces or the bad guys. Right. So good guys, bad guys. You start from an area of denial, meaning that you're very, very, let's put it this way. If the United States was going to go to war on the other side of the world, okay, we don't have a presence to really affect change until we get enough people and you have like a good enough force that you can actually project your power, okay? So there's a point of denial where you're nascent. You can think of it as like grassroots, right? But this is also when you're very vulnerable because you're starting out. So there's usually persecution during this time period, right? Then there's a contested point where now there's a friction point because people can start seeing that your movement is growing, right? Now's when things are really, they need to quash it now because if they leave it alone, it's going to be harder. It's going to be insurmountable. All right. And this is usually when persecution hits its peak. Right. Then there's a parity. So now you and the bad guys are pretty much equal. Right. So there's equality. So persecution subsides. And now everybody's trying to compromise. They're like, okay, I don't want you to take over. So what do I need to do now so we can still be friends? Right. There's negotiations. Right. During this point, and there's a parity. Then there's superiority, which again, now there's a friction point because the persecution now reverses. So now that I'm a little bit stronger, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that it wasn't cool to mess with me to begin with. That makes sense? And then supremacy is the point where the persecuted become the persecutors and there's no coming back. There's a corollary relationship here, okay? So one's increasing control directly corresponds to the other's decreasing control, all right? So as one is going up, inevitably the other one will go down. Revelation actually shows this. Again, it's not a biblical concept. It's actually a concept of war, but the book of Revelation really actually shows this process happening as well, all right? So this is the corollary. So when you're in a denial, your adversary has supremacy. When you're contested, they have the superiority, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So again, this is just something kind of to help us out. This isn't meant to be like, oh, you're trying to put in things that are not in the Bible. No, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to show something that can potentially help individuals, because as we see the churches go, this actually plays out. Okay, so let's look here now. So the overarching themes of the 7 churches are God's people across 7 periods of time. The first one is Ephesus. And one thing we're going to understand, in the Bible, names mean things. Okay? A name somebody is given means something. We don't typically, in our modern cultures, within, a baby might even be named before it's born, right? In this time, people would either have names they started out with and it would change, or sometimes parents would wait a while to even name their kid because they kind of want to see what the personality of the child is, or if it's to be something celebrated. So we see multiple times throughout the Bible where somebody is named, and they're named because of a specific thing, right? So, for example, when Reuben was born, Leah, Reuben's mother, Reuben was the first of the tribe of Israel, right? The first of Jacob, or Israel's children. She was very happy because she wasn't really loved by Jacob, because it was a whole, conniving thing to get her married anyways. But nevertheless, she was very happy that she had this male son, because now she's like, he has to value me. So the name Reuben means I'm happy to have my son, something to that effect. Okay. For example, when the angel came and told Mary, name him Jesus. And the name is actually Yeshua, which means Jehovah saves. Okay. So we see these, or like Daniel, his name means God is my judge. The book of Revelation specifically is filled with names, and each and every one of those names means something, including the names of the 12 tribes, including the name of Michael, including the name of Jezebel and Balaam. All those things mean something. So these church names also mean something. So Ephesus actually means desirable. So let's look here at this website, Bible Tools, and it shows us the definitions of what names mean. Specifically here, it actually breaks down from the different churches. But here's the meaning: desirable, darling, beloved, right? So things that you like, something that is you care about deeply, right? So it's desirable, not in the sense of something lustful, but desirable in the sense of something you're proud of. Okay? But as we read, we're going to find out that this church started out in a loving relationship and they ended out being complacent. All right? And the themes that are described in this church is, it goes from the nascent or a denial phase to a contested phase. And the reason that they're complacent is specifically because of this thing. They lose their first love. All right. Later on, we're going to go into the structure of or the format that each one of these letters, all right, because they're letters to the churches, every single one is structured in the same format. Okay. And we'll go over what those formats are, and we'll understand that as we read it, this is the general gist of the book. You started great, but you lost your traction. Okay. Next, we have Smyrna. And Smyrna means bitter myrrh. Okay. So we can already see something that's kind of quasi-negative here, but it's not necessarily negative about the church, but something negative that's happening to the church. All right. Interestingly enough, myrrh was a specific spice that was used for anointing dead bodies. All right. So let's look here. Smyrna. Right here. Myrrh. Bitter myrrh. Okay. Right here. Smyrna. So now, where there's pain, there's usually a doubt associated with this pain, aka, why am I going through this? All right. So we'll keep going here. The theme is again from contested to parody, and they are being persecuted and slaughtered. So the myrrh kind of makes sense because you're embalming the dead. All right. You are caring for the dead, but after they're dead. All right. Then you have Pergamum, which means height or elevation, but not just height in the sense of I'm at a tall building. It means my status has been elevated, but not because of my own merits, but because I married rich. Okay. So for example, you can think of somebody that was, there was a big thing about Princess Diana because she was a commoner and then she married Prince Charles. So her status was elevated through marriage. Now she's a princess and the potential future queen of England before she. Okay. So she went from being a commoner to a queen or a potential queen. This is kind of what's going on with Pergamum. Okay. There's an affinity phase here. And affinity just means that you're attracted to something. And this attraction heavily influences you. All right. There's this thing, there's a saying is like, or a song, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Right. Why? Because those things you see can influence you. Right. And so we see that the church is actually being elevated through marriage. All right. So right here, marriage, a high tower. Okay. So you're achieving a peak, not through your own merits, but through who you affiliate with. All right. So let's look here. It goes in this time period, they go from parity to superiority. And there's an ascension due to syncretism, ecumenism, or we can think of getting in bed with other religions and the state. All right.
What is syncretism?
Syncretism is when you start adopting other religions that aren't your own religion. So little bits of other people's religions will join with yours. So for example, voodoo. Voodoo is African folk religion mixed with Catholicism. Or Santeria, same thing. So you have like native folk religions mixing with Catholicism. Okay? That's what you would say is syncretism, because you're taking one religion and you're mixing religions. Ecumenism is slightly differently because it's the same religion, but what you're doing now is you are trying to whatever your practice is, I'm going to adopt also, and then you take some of mine. Okay, so there's a lot of changing hands, a lot of compromise during this time period. Does that make sense? Which aligns almost perfectly with parity. Because whenever there's a parity, you try to compromise, you try to negotiate, right? So you can cease the aggression. Does that make sense? So everybody's, so for example, you can think of like North and South Korea. Why are they in an armistice now? Because they basically came to loggerheads and nobody's making any progress, but a lot of people are dying. So at some point they say, okay, fine. You stay on that side, I stay on this side, and never the twain shall meet. All right. there was a parity there, right? So we can think of this again as there's a term, right? You get in bed with somebody, right? You get in bed with someone, and then that is this union that ends up coming out of it, right? It's just a term I use there. I think it kind of makes sense in this context. Next, you have Thyatira, and that means odor of affliction. So you can think of it as you're going to sweat a lot during this time period, and it's going to suck. Okay? So it means odor of affliction, continual sacrifice, and feminine oppression. All right? In the sense of not that the women are being oppressed, but that the women are the oppressors. Right? And later on, as we read the Bible, it makes even more sense as we go through these themes. Here. Back to the place. All right. Wrong place. Okay. So odor of affliction, and here there's an emulation, okay, in the sense that the church now starts looking a lot less like the church and a lot more like a normal nation. Okay, so the themes here are superiority to supremacy, right? And then back to superiority, because this is now the peak of the chiasm. I will show you this real quick in our candlesticks. So, what does this look like? It's a literary structure that we've been studying.
Chiasm.
A chiasm. Okay. So, Thyatira is smack dab in the middle, which means it's going to go like this and then like this. Does that make sense? So that's why as we continue studying through Revelation, we'll see that it goes to superiority to supremacy back to superiority. Because that's the high water mark. Okay? This is where the church is at its most powerful. Okay? But we're actually going to see how that's not a good thing. So there's a turning. But what the church ends up doing is it starts, because it started adopting in syncretism and ecumenism these practices that weren't originally in the church, we get into a point of false beliefs and spiritual adultery, which is AKA is false relationships. Okay, in the sense of we're putting more faith in the state coming to our rescue than God himself. Does that make sense? So at the high water mark of the church, the reason they're so powerful is because they've gotten everybody on board, because it's a lot easier to catch flies with honey, right? And also when it comes to the state backing your play, right? So now, and that causes a lot of affliction. We'll go through the whole study. We'll find out. The next church is Sardis, which means those who are escaping. Look right here. Go ahead and read that right here.
So Sardis means remnant, those escaping, renovation, the sun, red ones, and Prince of Joy.
Okay. So what we're going to understand as we read, these are just different definitions that theologians have come up with through the years. But as we read the issues that are presented in the church, the clear name makes sense. And it actually is this one, those escaping. Okay? And there's a point of discord now, because remember, wherever there's superiority and parity, there's friction points, right? So here the themes are superiority to contested, and there's a reversing of the syncretism, getting out of bed with religions in the state. Okay, it's a slow and gradual progression, but it's slowly doing it. Again, if we look at the chiasm, where Pergamum was getting in bed with the state, you see that now this side is they are getting out of bed with other religions in the state. Does that make sense? Then you have Philadelphia, which the word literally means brotherly love. So it's interesting to have that city in the United States called Philadelphia, and that's why they named it that way, because they knew what it meant. All right? So here, brotherly love. Let's go here. But while there's brotherly love amongst the brethren, they're actually being suppressed by those on the outside. So there's a thing where, like, for example, during times of crisis, people tend to bond together, and they tend to be a lot more self-sacrificing, right? You see, for example, prisoners of war, where everybody's kind of in a bad way, and they see one guy's either sick or starving, they might sacrifice their meals for the other person, and that is the pinnacle of love, right? Self-sacrificial love. But it's brought upon because of a suppression. Something's being silenced, right? So here you go from contested to parity, and this is a time period that I'll describe as the Great Awakening, right? And we'll go over a deeper study into that. What does that mean? What does the Great Awakening mean? Then the last one here, I don't know why it's a 1, it should be a 7, but Laodicea, okay? And it means justice or rule of the people. So let's click here. There it is, rule of the people. And interestingly enough, it looks like the people are in power, but when Jesus describes their state, he actually says that they are desolate. So they think they're in charge, they think they're rich, but they're actually poor, and they're actually in a wasteland, right? So it also, because it's the last church, it goes right back to the same place the church was at its peak. Okay? And there's a parity, then there's a superiority, then there's a supremacy, and which will ultimately be contested. But just as the statue of Daniel, okay, the only thing that took out the iron mixed with clay was the stone cut from the mountain, which is a representation of Christ. Christ is the only one that can also put an end to this phase as well. Okay? So here we can think of it as a resurgence. So it's a resurgence back to the middle, okay, back to Thyatira. And the resurgence is once again due to the same things: syncretism, ecumenism, and getting in bed with other religions and the state. And because this is the case, they will be judged. Okay? So that's what we have for today when it comes to the candlesticks. Right? I'll go back to the diagram to show here. And so the things that are present in Ephesus are reflected in Laodicea. The things that are presented in Smyrna are reflected in Philadelphia, Pergamum, Sardis, and Thyatira. And ultimately, these guys will try to go back to the middle once again. Okay? This is the overview. This is the Daniel 2 of the book of Revelation. This is the statue that sets everything else in motion. So everything that comes after Revelation chapter 3 occurs between churches 1 and churches 7. Does that make sense? All right. So give us a recap of what you've kind of grasped from the study today.
Well, just that the candlesticks kind of lay the foundation for the rest of the book. And understanding that helps us, like we were talking about before, in terms of, is it sequential or is it at the same time? And, what we see is that it just repeats itself. And that understanding of the chiasm helps us really validate all of this, right? And so just having an understanding of that foundation and how everything else reflects back to that. And there was a verse we just read that basically said that, right? It said that the candlesticks were the churches and the stars were the angels of this. And so it's kind of tied everything together. And so as we go study the stars and the churches, we're going to be able to come back to the candlesticks.
So next week, we're going to continue with the different components. So we got through in the holy place, right? So that's the first compartment of the sanctuary. we got through the candlesticks. So next week we're going to talk about the other components: the table of showbread, the altar of incense. The reason we spent so much time specifically on this one is because everything else falls into this, right? So I think that was a good overview. I'll go ahead and pray to close this out. So just give me 1 second so I can find where I was before. There we go. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for opening our eyes and opening our ears to your word, and to show that if we truly want to understand your word, we have to get into it and get deeper and deeper and see where these tie-ins are, and see how a surface level reading, Lord, will never get us there. Please be with all of those that are watching this, that encourage them to continue in their studies and to learn more about you and your plan for us and humanity. Holy name. Bye-bye.